الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وعلى آله الطيبين والطاهرين والمعصومين والصاحب المنتجبين وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين. Dear sisters and brothers, assalamu alaikum. Today we are commemorating the death, the shahadat of our beloved lady Fatima Az-Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, who Allah and the Prophet loved very much. Now how do we know Allah loved her? Anyone has ever read Hadith al-Kisa? In the portion where Allah explains to Jibreel who was under the cloak, under the blanket. And Allah says, Hum Fatima wa abuha wa ba'luha wa banuha. Allah explains that it is Fatima and her father and her husband and her sons. So look at the dignity. First he explains Fatima, the great Fatima is there first. And her father and her husband and her children. Can you imagine the izzat, the greatness that Allah has bestowed upon her? But if you look throughout the Quran, after that was revealed, the Hadith was revealed, then the ayat of Tathir was revealed. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدَ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمْ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah explained that He only desired to remove all blemishes or uncleanness and purify them with the perfect purification, the Ahlul-bayt. So say that Fatima is the purified one. She was so pure on this earth. She's known as Sayyidat al-Nisa al-Alameen, the leader of the women of the worlds. So she was of such greatness. But what happened to the world that they ignored her? They ignored the Prophet, first of all, and they ignored her, and they hurt her, and they oppressed her. What kind of world that we live in, that who Allah gives such reverence to the Prophet and his family, that we as humanity have abandoned her? Sayyida Fatima is a strong and clear embodiment of seeking of justice. Because as soon as the Prophet died, the oppression was clear. Whatever the Prophet gave her in terms of inheritance, they stole it from her. Can you imagine in this world that you see people's rights being stolen? And in this ruling system, there are those that are criers of the slogans and who are subject nations and the oppressed ones or in the oppressed classes. There's so many different classes of people, unfortunately, in this world. We're not living in a world of equality. And she learned from her parents how to stand up for justice. From her father, from Lady Khadija al-Kubra, who was she? She was an example for our women today. Today our women think that, they have to be barefoot and pregnant at home. Where did we get this? Yes, it's a blessing that she's the woman that bears the children in the house. But look at Khadija al-Kubra. She was a businesswoman who hired the Prophet. And she gave away all her wealth. She was the richest woman in that part of the time. And she gave it all the way to the poor. So Fatima learned from her parents. But what happened to her with her rights? Now I'm going to give you something of her speech. When the fadak that was taken from her, the land that was taken from her as an inheritance that her father gave her, they took it. And she goes to them and goes to the Muslims and goes to the court and fights. And we need to learn from that, because today, how do you fight against oppression? Not by swords, not by guns, but by your words. And this is our chance to be a reflection of that light of Fatima. So Fatima, who was denied her rights, says, O Muslims, will my inheritance be usurped? Surely you have come up with an unprecedented thing. Do you intentionally abandon the book of Allah and cast it behind your back? And when it's narrated with the story of Zachariah, he said to Allah, so give me an heir as thyself, one of that who will inherit me. Why did she give this ayat? Because they said the prophets didn't leave inheritance. And she's saying, look at the Quran. Prophet Dawood had Sulaiman, and Solomon inherited from Dawood. Prophet Zachariah is asking Allah, please give me someone who will inherit from me. And Yahya was born, which the Christians call John the Baptist. So Fatima is saying, and inherit the prosperity of Yaqub, but kindred by hood have prior rights against each other in the book of Allah, shall encounter you on the day of gathering. Fatima is saying, look, on the day of judgment, look what's going to happen. What a wonderful judge Allah is. A claimant is Muhammad, and the day of judgment is the rising, and at the time of that hour, the wrongdoers will see what will happen to them. So she says, you're denying my right, you're stealing from me, you're oppressing from me, there's injustice in this world. But watch, on the day of judgment, you will not see the heaven that you wish for, you will see the punishment. So today, women's rights are being oppressed. How many of you have seen the story of Amanda Todd? Who is she? From British Columbia. She sent her picture of herself, unfortunately, to her boyfriend, who passed her on to a whole bunch of guys, and it was not a very good picture, but people teased her. What happened? They bothered her. They oppressed her. She committed suicide. She's dead today. Why? Because first she was oppressed, and there were people who didn't stand up for her. Though she was being oppressed, though she was being teased, we don't realize how much individuals get hurt through bullying, through teasing. That's not the only one. Nova Scotia, the sister Parsons, same situation. She was raped, nothing happened. The police didn't do a damn thing. Then they took her picture and put it all over the internet, which was child pornography. They didn't do anything. She fought for her rights, she couldn't take it anymore, committed suicide. That's not the role model of Fatima. Fatima fought for her rights. Giving up on life is not a solution. But what does that tell you? Today, women are being oppressed all over the world. You know there's human trafficking? There's slavery today? They take girls and they make them slaves. They take boys too. Happens to guys too. All over the world today, in the 21st century, oppression of women, it's just unfathomable. Now you may say, well, Islam is part of the problem. Everybody talks on TV. Every internet, you type oppression, they'll show a woman in a scarf, oppressed. They don't show a picture of Mary oppressed, because Mary, the mother of Jesus, that's not oppression. That's dignity, humility, humbleness. Wait a second. Why do you say one thing for Mary and you say a different thing for Muslim women who want to cover their beauty and be modest? Anyway, but any picture you see, type oppression, they show Islam. They'll talk about, oh, but look what happens in Afghanistan. A lot of you are from Afghanistan. What happens? They keep bringing up the story, well, isn't the little girl who wanted to go to school and threw acid at her face? Well, yeah, the extremist Wahhabis who were just crazy did that. But that's not Islam. So if you look at some of the great scholars in the world, they said, wait a second. One was, for example, William Montgomery Watt. I've talked about this in the past, if you've ever been in a discussion. He was a professor in England, and he said Muhammad can be seen as a figure who testified on behalf of women's rights. Salawat. Now, you may say, well, yeah, a Muslim saying it, it's biased. A non-Muslim saying it, yeah, that's probably true. Well, there's other professors. There's another lady who came out and said the same thing. Now, her name is Anne-Marie Schimmel. She said the same thing. She said, compared to the pre-Islamic position of women, Islamic legislation meant an enormous progress. The woman has the right, at least according to the letter of the law, to administer the wealth she has bought into the family and she has earned with her own work. So these are great scholars, and she was an Orientalist, taught at Harvard, she's a scholar of Sufism, she's a scholar of Islam, and she's telling them, wait a second, Islam is the solution. They did give rights to women. Now why the oppression of Fatima right during the time of the Prophet and after the Prophet's death? How could that be possible if Islam is such a beautiful religion? Well, we know Islam is the truth, but in the hands, as I think Bernard Shaw says, in the hands of some of the most barbaric people. That doesn't mean that we blame all of Christianity of what Hitler did. Didn't he say he was Christian? We don't blame Christianity for that. But today they're blaming Islam because why? They're scared. But let's go back to Fatima, how great she was. She represented the women of the world. How do we know that? In Quran, Allah had asked when there was an argument in Mubahila, and to a point where they said, okay, you bring yourselves, we bring ourselves. You bring your women, we bring our women. You bring your sons, we bring our sons, and we will have a battle. And we'll pray, and Allah will remove the mercy away from those who are the liars. The ayat, who knows the ayat? I'll give you a gift. I'll start it, I'll give you part of it. Nadu abna'ana wa abna'akum wa nisa'ana wa nisa'akum wa anfusana wa anfusakum. You know it? You know the whole ayat from the beginning?
Somewhat.
Go for it. Chapter 3, verse 61. Alright, don't worry. Don't put him on the spot. No problem. He won't show up again. Okay. So Allah's saying, bring your women folk. Who did the Prophet bring? He brought himself, and with himself he brought Ali, and then of the women he brought Fatima. Out of all the wives of the Prophet, out of all the women of the world, he brought Fatima, and then Hassan and Hussein. These were the pure ones, and these are the ones when the Christians of Najran saw this. Wait a second. If these people prayed, the mountains would crumble for whatever they asked for. So these people are pure. So what does that say? Allah is explaining how great this woman was. Allah has given rights to women equally to men. And Fatima was an example of how important womanhood was for all of us to know. In those days, they didn't want daughters. They would kill their daughters. They would bury them alive. Women were inherited by men. Women did not have large businesses. Like Khadija was a different person. So the Prophet showed to the world, wait a second, all these foolish ideas, I'm going to break it, because Allah is saying women are great and they're equal in terms of rights towards men. Yeah, they're different people, different roles, but they have great rights. So Islam doesn't give preferential treatment to men. I don't know why people think that. Again, maybe they think, they look at the Bible, and if you look at some of the verses of the Bible, for example, Paul in I think Timothy 2 says to women, you should be quiet, don't talk. Well, I'm telling you, women should stand up and stand up for the truth and say like the way Fatima did. And if I explain, like Deuteronomy, where it talks about if a woman, I don't even want to say, but if she did something before she got married, they can stone her to death. And this is in the Bible. It's not in Islam. And now this is not something we believe in. We even think this was added to the Bible. It's not something Islamic. It's not something of truth. But these are the lies that are put in this world. Another ayat of Quran that's very important for us is Allah has explained to you that women will get to keep their share. Chapter 4, verse 33, Allah says, for men is a share of what their parents and near relatives leave, and for women is a share of what their parents and near relatives leave, whether it be little or much, an appointed share. And if you look at these, a lot of people are watching these shows about England in the 1800s. I don't know, anyone saw like, I think Abbey or...
Downton Abbey?
Yeah, Downton Abbey. Do you know what the story's about? Women could not inherit. It was like craziness. It came, like the 1800s, finally women began to inherit. So, where did inheritance come? It came during the time of the Prophet, when Allah revealed that women will inherit from their relatives. They have equal share, they have equal right. If their father or mother wants to give them anything, they have a right. Prior to that, women could not get anything. They were oppressed. That was the standard that changed the world till today. You may say, well, there's rights for women today because what sparked it was the teachings of Allah in the Quran. Now, women like Fatima have brought about some great things in this world. You always hear about Mother Teresa, for example, who saw poverty in India and did something about it. She didn't just stay quiet. She said, I'm going to help these people. Now, we know of, for example, Zainab bint Ali, the daughter of Fatima, who was oppressed in Karbala, who saw her brother being killed, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. What did she do? Did she stay quiet? No, she stood up and she was the messenger that was left. After the manifestation of the revolution, she was the revolution. She protected Imam Zain al-Abidin. She did everything for us to have Islam today. You may say it's a pivotal point in history. A woman saved Islam. Look how great that is. And we know that. We know Mary was great. And there's a chapter named in Quran of Maryam, for example. We know about all the great women like Asiya, the wife of Pharaoh. We know about Khadija. We know of Fizza. We know of Layla. Layla, look at that. The wife of Imam Hussein. Would you sacrifice your child to fight for truth? Well, she did. She saw her son die. Now, if you look at her family side, they were some of the opposite side. But she stuck to the Ahlul-bayt, Layla, and her son Ali Akbar died in the way of Allah. What a great woman. We can never be like that. I asked your mother, would she ever let you fight in a battle protecting the Prophet? It's very hard. Protecting the Prophet's family is very hard. Protecting the oppressed, because there's oppressed ones today. How many people would jump in front of somebody who's being oppressed. Very few. If you see someone being teased, you either stay quiet or you join the bully. Unfortunately, that's how we are. Maybe some of you are better, but that's how we are. We're ashamed. We're scared. Well, there are women who say, wait a second. I see something wrong and I'm going to do something about it. For example, we talk about Layla. There's another Layla Bakhter. Anyone heard of her? Dr. Layla Bakhter. She was one of the, maybe the second woman that I've seen that has translated the Quran from Arabic to English. And what she did was, she said, wait a second, she may not have the most perfect translation. It's very hard to have perfect translation. There is none. But she saw things that were wrong. Like the word yadribahunna, which means to hit. Also means to hit the road, means to go. In chapter 4, verse 34, some Muslim says, well, that means that you're allowed to hit your wife. What? Would the Prophet ever do such a thing? This was mistranslated by people who are against Islam, and it just stayed in the books like this. She said, wait a second, I'm going to translate the Quran in the right way, because it means to separate. Even today, Ayatul Nasir Makaram, in his online translation of Quran, he says, separate from your wife. Don't hit them. Who's going to stay married with if you hit them? This is un-Islamic, it's against God, and it's against women, and you're oppressing women. Well, there are other great people who did great things. You heard of, who wrote Frankenstein? Mary Shelley, right? You ever heard of her? I guess you guys don't read books anymore. You watch the movie Frankenstein, and they change it like crazy. Anyway, her mother was a lady named Mary Wollstonecraft. What a weird name, right? Anyway, Wollstonecraft, what did she do? She, at her time, women couldn't even go to school. You know, they blame the oppressors of the Taliban didn't allow women to go to school. These were adult women who couldn't go to university, couldn't have an education. Why? So she wrote a book against the vindication of women's rights in 1792. Can you imagine how long ago? And she fought for women's rights. And even today, they honor her for, you know, in terms of women's movements that you see. They honor her because she did something about it. Why am I bringing these women up? Because, yeah, we love Fatima, we love Zainab, but there are other women in the world that says, wait a sec, I'm not going to stay quiet anymore. It's like we talked about Surah Zulzal, where it talks about how she will complain. Well, instead of complaining, let's do something about it. And so she did something. Now, you may say, well, these are revolutionary women. I can't do that. I'm more maybe a poet, or maybe I can do spoken word, or maybe I'm an intellect, I can write a book. Or I know a lot of you guys do a lot of posts on Facebook or Twitter, or show pictures on Instagram. You can show things that will change the world. Little things can change the world. There's another lady named Nora Carlin. She was trying to say men of wealth used to hijack humanity and enslave them. Today, a lot of you guys want a good job. You're going to go work for $10 an hour if you're lucky, because that's the minimum wage in Canada, right? $10.70. But you're going to be a slave. You're going to be enslaved. And that's the sad situation, where people are just barely surviving, just to eat. And they can't even handle it with one job. They have 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Their children have to work, their grandparents have to work, and they're on government aid. They still can't survive. So what she was trying to say was, women have to fight for their rights, and they couldn't. How did they organize? They had to go work. Because at least they were with other women, they should stand up together and say, okay, now I want my rights. Now I want my dignity. But women were treated like garbage. They were given low pay. They were given horrible jobs. Plus they had to take care of the home. Plus they had to take care of the sick and the elderly. And if people went to war, they had to take care of them too. So the women had to suffer a lot. Now you may say, well, why were women singled out? Why were they discriminated? Why do you think, brother? Bilal, why do you think they're discriminated?
I don't know.
Take a guess. You work out, right?
No.
You don't? You go to the gym?
No.
Oh, you should. Everybody should be healthy. And one of the things what men have, what do they have?
Power.
Huh?
You usually have
Testosterone.
oh, at the gym, yeah.
Yeah, they're really pumped up. There's a scientist whose name is Stephen Goldberg. And you may say, well, yeah, it doesn't sound like a very nice name. Yeah, what does it matter? What he said was, he suggested men are naturally more competitive than women. This is one guy, okay, he's saying this. Because of their level of testosterone. They're more aggressive, they're power hungry, And inevitably, they take charge and high command, and they just dominate the women. Well, if that's the case, why were women revered by some of the greatest warriors of this world? Wait a second. So sometimes you see men who have this, what is called, not road rage, but roid rage. They take on these steroids and they're crazy. Well, does that mean every guy is crazy and they're on these steroid blasts? No. There's something else. There's another guy whose name is Frederick Engels. Now you may say, who the heck is he? Yeah, you know him?
Economist.
Very good. This guy is smart. He was very promoting of Marxism, actually. So he said what caused oppression of women is when the class system started. When you had these different class systems. Now you're saying women are oppressed. Now you're saying women were bothered and they're enslaved and all this stuff. Well, everybody has these theories. There's another guy named Stephen Taylor. He says men have such a psychological disorder. I think the women agree with him. But anyway, the oppression of women is a symptom of this disorder. And it's not because of the level of testosterone. He was against what Stephen Goldberg said. And he said that the indigenous cultures revered women. The ancients revered women. So they had a lot of testosterone. So it's not that. We know the problem. It started with Iblis. He had arrogance. He had takabbur. He had pride. What else did he have? He was racist. Now you may say women are being discriminated against. Well, in the Quran, Allah talks to both genders. Clearly. Now for example, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wal untha. Allah says, O mankind, I've created you, O humanity, I've created men and women. Why? لِتَعَارَفُوا, so you can know each other. Not that you can fight with each other. So we need to do something like these women who did something to make this world a better place. We need to do something. And you may say, well, I'm a guy. Why should I protect the rights of women? Well, don't you love Fatima? Don't you love your mother? Some of us don't have mothers anymore who've passed away. You don't know how tough that is. You should respect your mother while she's alive. Because she deserves the honor. What she went through, you can never repay. Even the Quran talks how great the mother has done for you and how you should give her respect and rights. Allah says in Quran, Ya ayyuhal insan inna qadihun illa rabbika qadhan famulaqin. You can tell me what that means. Allah says, O humanity, surely thou art one who is laboring towards thy Lord, laboriously, and thou wilt be one who encounters Him. So Allah is saying, you do some work. فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَهُ, as the sister said. If you do an atom's weight of work, you will encounter Allah. Some people say, I want to get close to God in salah. I want to get near to God by going to the masjid. Allah is saying, you work for me and do something good on this earth, you will encounter me. And you will encounter me in this life, as Fatima did, and in the Day of Judgment, and in the hereafter. You will be seeing that Allah is carrying you in your situations, that He's helping you in your situations. Now you may say, life is tough. Life is filled with misery. Life is filled with struggling, but the righteous strive hard. No matter how hard your exam is in school, if you don't study and do good, you'll fail. So you have to strive hard. So Allah knows what you're going through, but He will reward you in this life and the next. So have hope in salvation. So what do we need? We need wisdom, though. You can't just act without brains. So if you have a friend who's a fool, he's going to hurt you, or she's going to hurt you when she thinks she's helping you. I gave this example in camp like 15 years ago, where, you ever go to camp and you eat the spicy food? So someone says, give me a glass of water, this is too spicy, right? So someone says, oh, here's some hot water from the tea kettle. Here. Guess what happens? He burns his mouth, or she burns his mouth. That's a sign of a fool. You don't want someone who's a fool to be, changing the world. That means we need to be smart. We need wisdom. We need intelligence. Why do you think you're getting an education here? You're in Canada because you're given an opportunity to go to university, go to school, get a good job. But first, improve the brain. Understand, broaden your horizons. So there was a Nobel Peace Prize winner named Alexis Carrel who said, wisdom is like the lights of a car. And it will show you the way. And your love is like the motor that makes it move. So you need the action, but you need the wisdom to show you which direction to go. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You're going to be like, it's like having a blind person trying to drive. You're going to crash, right? Each is nothing without each other. You need both. A motor without lights is blind love, dangerous, tragic, and infers death. So let's strive together and do good intelligently. Then we shall encounter Allah. Now I want to give you an example before we end and talk about an open Q&A of Fatima Zahra. Today we're honoring her, so let's talk about a few minutes of what happened to her in her last days. The Messenger of Allah has said, Fatima is a part of me. So you ever heard of the ayat of Quran? If you love Allah, follow me. Qul in kuntum tuhibbuna Allah fattabi'uni. Allah is saying, follow the Prophet. What did the Prophet do? He loved Fatima so much that she would be his companion. Whenever they were throwing rocks at him, they were beating him, they were torturing him, they were hurting him, they boycotted him, they didn't even have food. Who was the one who was always with the Prophet, protecting the Prophet, removing the blood from his face when the kids were throwing rocks and the people were throwing rocks? Fatima. So the Prophet said, Fatima is of me, please. Whoever pleases her, pleases me. So please follow that. And we need to live that. Fatima, who represented purity, but they killed her entire family. Not only they went and attacked her, they attacked her husband Ali, they attacked her children, each and every one, Hassan, Hussein, and even the families and the grandchildren, Ali Asghar and Ali Akbar. Can you imagine killing babies in this time of the world, chopping their heads off? They did that to Fatima's grandchildren. Why? Because of the arrogance, the pride, the lack of morality, the evil that the world is filled with. But we need to crush that. Because our nafs are telling you, Amar bisu, that go in that direction. We say, no, we're going to block that greed, the arrogance, and live pure. Follow Fatima. So today, she's still being oppressed. Because who she represented were the women of the world. Now, if women are being oppressed, that means Fatima is still being oppressed. And we need to do something to fight for the rights of women. Now, you may say, well, we live in Canada, they have more rights than other places. Well, how many CEOs in this country are women? How many prime ministers and presidents have you seen that are women? Well, you saw some in other countries, Bangladesh or Pakistan, but anyway, you don't see that in America. You don't see that in the United States, you don't see it in Canada, you don't barely see it in Europe, maybe you see it in Germany. So, we need to fight for people's rights. We need to fight for women's rights. But they attacked her. They attacked Ali. They attacked her home and they began to burn her house. And as soon as the Prophet died, they wanted her and Ali to bear allegiance to people that she did not like, that went against what the Prophet said. So she heard the word. They said, attack her house. Then they said, and she heard them coming closer. And they said, even though Fatima's in this, it doesn't matter. Attack. They burned their house. And they wanted her to pledge allegiance to a usurper of the rights of Fatima. So she fought back. One time when Fatima was cooking and taking care of the children and the grain she was taking and crushing the grain and doing a lot of hard work, the Prophet saw her and was crying. The Prophet saw her crying. And the Prophet was crying so much. And he came to her and he said, daughter, bear the hardships this world, and later you will enjoy the blessings of the hereafter. See, the Prophet knew what was going to happen to her one day. He saw her struggling while she was young, and he knew what was going to happen to her when she was going to be older. Her father suffered in Mecca, and the daughter was there to support him. Who was there to support Fatima? Her husband, but her little children. She had little children, 7, 6, 5, 4. Imam Hassan was 7. Imam Hussein was 6. Zainab was 5. Little children. Her suffering spirit was like a wounded bird whose wings have been broken. It's been imprisoned from 3 sides. From 3 sides she suffered. 1, the silent and sorrowful visage of her husband when she saw that her husband, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, was usurped of his rights, and they dragged him on the streets of Medina and pulled him on with chains around his neck down the streets of Medina. The same one who saved Islam in the battles of Uhud, Khandaq, Badr, the same one who helped the Prophet wherever he went, that they did that to him, and they did that to her, and they did that to their children. Second thing that saddened her was her children. How much they look sad, what has happened to her father, to her, and to her grandfather. Imam Hassan, Imam Zainab was so sad, it broke her heart. Third, the cold earth upon her father. She cried when her father, the Prophet, was leaving this world. But she smiled because she knew that she would be coming soon. How much of an oppressed life that you actually are happy that you're going to die. How much did she suffer? So during her death, she went to pray her last prayer and passed away. A candle of fire and sorrow is extinguished in Ali's house. And Ali remains alone with his children. He remains silent for a moment. He suddenly senses the exhaustion of a whole lifetime. He loved Fatima so much. He still smelled the fragrance of her beauty, as if a flower from paradise has come and left. He still smelled her fragrance in her mind. It is as if every word which is pulled from the depths of his being, he gives up from his part of his existence. He lost the Prophet, and then 75 days to 90 days later, he lost his wife. And asked for her request. Her last will and testament was, bury me at night. Don't allow any of these horrid people to be at my grave. And the next day, they saw so many different graves. They wanted to dig up these graves, and they're putting swords into the graves. And they don't remember Imam Ali was the warrior of God who stood and protected. Can you imagine? Even after she's dead, they were oppressing her. Till today, we don't know where she's buried. We know somewhere, maybe in Medina, maybe in the Prophet's Mosque, maybe in Jannat al-Baqi. We don't know. Because we know that the world will maybe dig up her grave or oppress her or blow it up, like we saw what happened in Iraq. So let not her death and sacrifice be in vain. Let us represent her in helping all the oppressed, especially the women of this world. Salawat. Allah.